Hi, Linda Winter here. I want to show you today the double-handed pot holder. This pot holder has a pocket and a pocket. That way I can use this with my oven or my microwave pulling things out. We have Insulbright inside. I want to show you a real easy way to make this. If you've got Martelli tools, and you might have our half-inch ruler, a half. This is a great ruler for all kinds of things. You can use this for doing this project, but I'm not going to use it today. Likewise with the no-slip strip ruler, my favorite tool in the world. I've always said, love this ruler, but there's actually an easier, faster way. I've got videos on those rulers that'll show you some really cool things, but what we're going to do is use the 8.5-inch square that's in this package. If you bought one of our tables, with the table you get the 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. That's our small squares, and then you get the 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5 set of squares. We're going to grab the 8.5 out of here. This is going to allow me to cut my base really quickly, really easily. Then I need the Winter Designs 8-inch circle. This 8-inch circle, if Michelle, you can zoom in, I've got a mark here and a mark here and a mark here and a mark here. Those marks are made on this 8-inch circle. If you have our template that has this 8-inch circle with those marks, then you're good to go. If not, I'm going to pull over here and we're going to place this on the mat, and you'd get a Sharpie. A metallic Sharpie works best, and find this where it centers up. So we'd want this to have centered in here, and then you take a Sharpie and put a mark. I'm going to line this up here. I'm looking at here, I'm looking at here. I put a mark and a mark and a mark and a mark. So I'm using this center of my mat and looking at that. So I put a mark here, mark here, mark here, mark here with your Sharpie. And I've got a picture that will show you basically that a little bit later. Now we're going to come back here. So we've got the 8-inch circle, I've got my 8.5-inch square, and then I'm going to use the 4x16 ruler. You can use this ruler if you have it, or you can use the 8.5-inch square. Either way, it just depends on what tools you have. This is going to make what I do a little bit faster, easier. The whole goal is get her done. It better be good, it better be fast. The two together make me really happy. So we're going to look at the fabrics that we need. You have a choice of doing the same fabrics for the pockets. You can see inside I've just folded that in half, and then I have the same fabric here and the same fabric here. You can do that, or as I'm going to do today, you can do a contrasting fabric. Let me grab over here. This is going to be the contrasting fabric. When it comes to the contrasting fabric, I'm going to have that on the inside, and you can choose to have it on the back, so basically here and here, or you can do one more thing. You can put the Insulbright, which is going to be in the center inside of here. It's right in between these two pieces, or you can make it the back side. So it's totally up to you how you want to have this done. You can see on this one, I've got Insulbright on the back. Insulbright needs to be there because we want to protect our fingers. It's just a matter of whether you want that fabric to show with the contrasting fabric with one of your coordinating fabrics here, or if you want the Insulbright. So I've got pieces of fabric. I need at least 8.5 inches for my fabric for the top, for the pockets, and I need at least 8.5 inches for the fabric that's going to be here, right here. So I've got that, and then in the pockets themselves, I've got batting. You can use batting, you can use felt, you can use polar fleece, whatever you have at home that will give this a little bit of substance. And then that Insulbright. And then you use the normal sewing tools. You need straight pins, your rotary cutter, a sewing machine, an iron, those kinds of things. I have one more thing that I like to use when I do a project like that. This is the Stitch in the Ditch foot, Martelli's Stitch in the Ditch binding foot. It's a seam guide foot. What this allows you to do is sew straight. Because I have an edge here, this edge is going to keep me sewing straight. It also gives me a perfect 1/4 inch. When I look at the pockets here, this top stitching that's done here, that's done with this Stitch in the Ditch foot because it's a seam guide foot and it'll keep me sewing straight. And this will fit your sewing machine. All right, so first thing we want to do is grab our 8.5-inch square, and I'm going to grab my coordinating fabrics. I've got 4 layers. This would be if you decide that you want to do the pockets the same as the inside fabric and then the back fabric. So I'm going to take my Get a Grip material. This Get a Grip grabs. This is what I call no slipping, no kidding. Can you see how I'm pushing on here and this doesn't move? When I line this up with the lines that I've got on my fabric here and I go to turn, I cut and turn and cut and turn. this is creating basically a turntable for us. You can use a turntable. Martelli has an amazing turntable that I love, but I don't really need it for this project. When I go to cut, I cut and I turn that template, and I cut and I turn that template. Now if you've got bad eyes and you're having a hard time starting here, start on the side and go backwards and forwards. So when you do that, again, if you've got issues with your eyes, backwards and forwards. What that allows me to do is cut 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, up to 10 layers maybe 12, depending on the loft of that fabric. This is a basic cotton quilting fabric, but it will let me cut all those layers at the same time. So I've got my fabric. I'm going to use these two for the base, so we'll get them out of the way. And now let's talk about the pockets. You've got a couple ways you can do pockets. You can use, again, the contrasting fabric or a different fabric. I'm going to grab those two fabrics, put them aside, and we want to grab and do the inside pocket. This is going to be our polar fleece batting felt. I've got some batting here. Now our pockets were 8.5, or our pieces were 8.5 by 8.5. And what we need to do for the two pockets right over here is cut a 4 1/4 about by an 8 inch. Now this ruler is 4 inches. 4 inches by my 16 inches. So basically we're going to use this ruler as my guide. You're going to square off first. Mine is pretty much straight, and it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be using this along the edge and cutting our circle in just a minute. But I want to give myself about 1/4 inch. When I go to the mat, Michelle, I don't know if you can zoom in here, but I've got this line right here that's my 1/4 inch. So basically I've given myself about 1/4 inch there. And then what I'm going to do is use the ruler, and I'm going to square this off. And then I'm going to cut along here. And now I've given myself a 4.5 inch by about 12 inches. So I'm going to put this aside because I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to grab my 8.5 inch block. I need this to be 8.5 inches. So I'm lining up to the edge here, and I'm lining up to the edge here. And then when I go to square this off, basically I've done my cutting. Again, I could do it with the no slip strip ruler, the 1/2 inch ruler, even this ruler, but I've got to measure cut, lining up on my mat. I don't want to fool with any of that, so this is a faster way for me to do that. Okay, now let's grab those pocket fabrics. You have to decide if you're doing something like this, do I want the lines to go this way or do I want the lines to go this way? I'm going to go this way just so you can see the difference, and we want to give this a good fold and just a finger press. Now if you're particular about this, get your iron out and give that a press. Do you see the wrinkle that's right there? I would definitely iron that. Otherwise, I don't really iron that finger press in. I'm not going to do that just for the sake of the video, but you get the idea. I want to bring my batting right up to that fold, and we'll bring this in, and then again, we give that a good finger press. What we want to do on this is get to the sewing machine, and whether you have the stitch in the ditch foot or not, we're going to sew 1/4 inch, and we're going to do that on both of these pieces. So I've done one. We're going to pretend that I've sewn that. And then we don't want to fold this way, we want to fold in the opposite direction. I'm going to show you two different options. My mock-up that I have is gone in the opposite direction, so we'll take a look at that. Again, give that a good press, open those fabrics up, put the batting right inside, and again, batting, polar fleece, flannel, felt, any of those fabrics that you have at home. And again, we'll give that a good top stitch. So we've got these two. So we can decide if we want to do this. See that look? Don't particularly like that too much, but you have that as an option. Or let me pull over some coordinating fabrics that I have. Here's another piece of fabric. When I went through the stash, this had the same colors, so I can decide, do I like this here? And do I like this here? Or, you notice here, let me grab, sorry, this one. Do I like that look? Or do I like this look? So you've got two choices when you're dealing with a fabric that has vertical lines, when it has some kind of a pattern. So you make the decision. The other decision that you want to make is, again, on the back side, do I want this or do I want this? If we're going to have this as my back, then this is going to be inside. So what we want to do is decide on the fabrics that we want. I'm going to have the interfacing this Insole Bright inside here and have this as the back. So we're going to cut these layers separately, and then we're going to cut this separately. So let's get all those other fabrics out of the way. I'm going to pull over my 8-inch circle, and what we need to do is give ourselves a little bit of a gap here. You decide how much it is that you want. When I have my fingers inside of here, I need space for my fingers to go in here, my fingers to go in here. You can be particular and be exactly the inch, or like I've got here on my pot holder, or it can be a 1/2 inch. You just decide. I'm looking at here, in between here and here, and I'm going to look at my mat. I'm looking at this blue line that I have here, and I'm looking here to here, and then I decide here to here. The next thing I want to do is flip this over and see if that I've got, look, way off. So I'm going to scoot this over a little bit more. I'm going to put this down this way, and then I'll place my fabric on top. That's going to give me more control and be able to get this pretty much the way that I want it. All right, so we're going to flip that over again. That's more centered. And you can see I don't have quite an inch. That really doesn't matter. Your fingers are going to go inside there. What does matter is this part right here. I'm going to go over to my mat where we don't have those blue lines. This right here, sometimes that gets a little bit busy, and I want to look in between here. When I look here and down here, I want to have the lines on the template be lined up with this right here, and then have those pockets lined up. If I wanted an inch, I would line this fold up to here and line this folded fabric up to here. And again, that's what I've done basically on this one. When I've got that the way I want, I'm going to make sure I have enough fabric for my circle template to cut. So I'm bringing it up a little bit, and I want to cut around. Now, there are a couple different ways that you can cut when you have a circle, or when you have something that isn't perfectly straight. You can cut around, what I call cutting off. Basically, I'm just cutting a little bit, and I just cut to where basically it just lets me go straight. So when I cut that way, I call that cutting off. You're just cutting along, and you're moving that template as you go. That's one way to do it. The next way to do it is just cut around. We're going to turn the template as we go. Turning the template as we go. Turning the template as we go. I particularly like cutting off. I have more control cutting off. So I'm going to go back here, but you decide. You've got to figure out how comfortable you are with the rotary cutter. So it's totally up to you. What I love about this is that get a grip grabs. It keeps that fabric all together, and then clean up anything that you need to clean up. So we've got that perfect circle. What this allows me to do is get all of my circle layers. I've got a bunch of layers here. All of these layers exactly the same. So we're going to remove this. I'm going to put that aside, and then I'm going to take my Insul Bright. With my Insul Bright, I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to cut around. And again, you decide, do you want to cut straight? Do you want to cut off? Do you want to turn as you go? The other thing I want you to think about is where my shoulder is. My shoulder and my arm. They're coming out. My shoulder, my arm extends from my shoulder, so this is where my blade should be. If I'm cutting here, which we've been taught to do because we use rulers that slide, we're having to put our weight down. What I want you to do is not cut from the boob. I want you to cut from your shoulder. Your arm naturally extends from the shoulder. So when we go to cut this way, I can see my blade. I can see right along that edge, and my blade is nice and straight rather than being at an angle. And then go clean up anything that you need to clean up. Right back here where I lifted up that ruler, the rotary cutter, when you're cutting, that just lets me continue to cut. So I've got all of that perfectly centered and nice and consistent. I've got one more place I want to clean up. There we go. No, one more. So now I've got my circle. Insul Bright here, and we'll pull these back over. So what are we going to do? We're going to lift this layer here where we want the Insul Bright. And this is the top that's going to be my hands, and this is the bottom that's going to be touching something hot. So we're going to place this right inside here. Line up your layers, and the next thing that we would do is pin, pin, pin. We'd pin all those layers together, and this is where you can decide. Do you want a bigger position for your fingers? Notice I'm just pulling this to make it a little bit wider. Totally up to you. And then pin around. What I like to do is top stitch this around first. Let me pull over my project. And you can see I've top stitched here before you put your binding on. That helps a whole lot. And if you really are concerned about it, top stitch here. The other thing you can do, again, if you want to be perfect about this, if you're a Martha Stewart on steroids, a perfectionist to the nth degree, spray basting. That 505 basting spray, you can spray on here and then put this down, give it a good pat. Same thing here, spray that. And then your other option is leave this as your back. So that gives you the option of having that Insul Bright showing. So again, you decide. Place these on, top stitch, and then we're going to pull over here. So we've top stitched here. This has been stitched here, so we would have stitched that. Imagine that's been stitched. And then you decide, are you going to use the double fold binding that I have here, or are you going to make your own binding? Now, there are a couple ways to do bindings. You guys know bindings are not a whole lot of fun. And our stitch in the ditch foot, along with our zip bind system, it's made for bindings, but it's not made for curves. This foot doesn't do curves well. It's made for straight. So when you're doing a curved binding like this, you've got a couple ways to do this. You can pin as I've done and do a straight stitch all the way around, hoping that the back is going to be as pretty as the front. You can do a zigzag or some kind of a decorative stitch here, or you can do the big time cheater way, a little line of glue here all the way around, and then a little line of glue here all the way around, and then use the plastic clothespins to hold that in place. And then I would finish that off with a top stitching. The last thing we want to do is give ourselves extra fabric for this little pocket holder, so this hanger that we have here, and finish off the edges. I don't know if Michelle you can see, these are finished edges rather than raw edge, and this is fabric rather than this. So what I would do with the binding is just stitch this along here and give yourselves enough fabric that you can make a nice little hold hanger, so you can hang that on your whatever it is, whatever hooks you've got, wherever it is that you want. That is the double pocket potholder. I'm going to show you another option. This one, same concept, except that we've done rickrack here. The rickrack gives you a top stitching on the back, which is really nice. This is your pie crust that we've got this look for us here, and that's the bottom of the pie. So pot holders, they're a whole lot of fun to do. I want to show you another pot holder that's done with the circle template. I'm not going to do directions for this. I'll have written directions on my website a little bit later, but I want you to see this right here gave me this here. If you've done these kinds of projects before, the problem is this doesn't always match this. And what do these do? These hang. You know, you're going to give these in a box, in a nice little container, and if this isn't the same as this, then it doesn't look so great. So we want those to be exactly the same, and that's done with the circle. So this 8-inch circle can be used for a bunch of different projects. So you'll find all the information on the screen as to where the written directions are. You can buy these from me. You can buy these from Nancy's Notions. That's why I'm doing this video. Nancy's Notions just ordered a whole bunch of these, so you can buy from her website. You can buy from my website. So let me know what you do with them. I'd love to see your pictures. Have fun. Enjoy. Thanks.